Address of Flossy Nikkel, Director of Youth Activities, National Farmers Union, Denver, Colorado, the 48th Annual Convention of the South Dakota Farmers Union.
Understanding of world problems. With this introduction, and I'm sure that we need no more introduction for Mrs. Harris, it is my pleasure then to present to you Mrs. Flossy Nikkel Harris. How am I doing?
President Radcliffe, Arlene, members of the Council, Farmers Union, youth, and friends. I always smile when they start to introduce me because I know that they are going to have some confusion. President Patton always introduces me as Mrs. Harris. You noticed he introduced me as Flossy Nikkel Harris. Well, it happens to be in the reverse, but once a month I get a letter in the office, and I have for the last 3 years, that says Flossy Nikkel and Harris. So you are nearer right than some of the rest of them. I should like to say before opening my remarks this evening, Arlene, that I was terrifically impressed with the presentation made by our young people. In this, one of the first conventions opening in the year of 1963, I think it is only fitting that the young people who will be the leaders in the future should open your convention, and I think this is real wonderful, Mr. Radcliffe. As I sat and listened to these young people singing and watched them dancing, I recognized that this was a part of a great deal of work that these young people have done, not only this past year, but over the past several years, in developing understanding. You notice the central theme with the two hands clasped with the word understanding beneath it. And if we just stop to think that understanding could mean so much in building world peace, this is necessary. And that we start building that understanding in our rural communities, in our families, communities, in our nation, in the Western Hemisphere, and around the world. And I know that these young people here in South Dakota this year spend a great deal of time at their camp learning about the people in the Latin American countries, learning about their music and about their cultures, and of course, you were fortunate enough to have your state director spend some time there representing the National Farmers Union and working in one of the international programs this past year. So you people here in South Dakota also accepted your responsibility in building world understanding by having as your guest and playing the host to a number of the people from Latin America. And certainly as I listened to these young people singing and saw the light on their face, I was very proud to be the part of an organization that plans activities for young people of this kind. Because I want to talk to you tonight and with you tonight about some of the problems that are facing our young people, and particularly our rural young people. I had the privilege of attending and participating in a national conference just about 2.5 weeks ago, in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I was fortunate to meet one of your very fine judges from the Aberdeen area at this same meeting. But the leaders who work with young people all over the United States, and particularly with the rural young people in this meeting, met because they are very, very much concerned about the problems that are facing our young people and what is happening and the opportunities that are lacking to some of the young people in our areas. And I think it perhaps removes the false impression that we have of the rural areas and the opportunities. There are many wonderful things and wonderful opportunities that our rural youth have in growing up in rural areas, but there are also some problems and some shortcomings. And these are growing greater and greater, and I want to take this opportunity to discuss with you some of the problems that are facing our young people. So I should like to talk about rural youth, their problems and prospects, and the responsibility of we as leaders, parents, and members of the Farmers Union toward our young people. We know that change has been going on since time began, And I'm sure that we all recognize and agree that change is necessary because a growing society is a changing society. And we would wish no other type than a growing, changing society. In the past, great changes took place so slowly that men were able to adjust to them without such spiritual travail as we now see today. The accelerated pace of growth and change in our nation during the last 25 years is almost beyond our belief. It is said that there has been more scientific advancement and discovery since World War II than in all previous time, and that the growth and change will be accelerated in the future. It is estimated that an individual must be totally re-educated every 10 years in order to work effectively as a knowledgeable citizen. It is also stated that 50% of these young people that you were listening to and that make up our country today, 50% of our young people being educated today, will in their lifetime hold jobs that you and I know nothing about today, completely new jobs. Now, periods of rapid change in a society can be particularly perplexing to young people when they themselves are undergoing great changes. Changes of maturity, of outlook on the world, decision-making, family relations, and community influences. Young people need time and a degree of stability around them in order to become a part of adult life and to build their own personalities. Denied these, they are thrown into uncertainties and set adrift by indecisions. The realities of becoming an adult are rather harsh and cruel and difficult for a majority of the teenagers. The urge to become independent is overpowering. Millions who are limited in their facts and experience are fired by the misguided ambition to leave school, get a job, get married, all in one quick whirlwind operation. Now, this drive is inconsistent with the environment and the present-day situation in which they are growing up. He runs headlong into the greatest need for a completed education and an adequate training and preparation for an increasing competitive society. The result? Frustration, worry, apprehension, and sometimes anger at the world, which causes the individual to react in many different ways. Because we know that when the mind is in a state of uncertainty and confusion, the smallest impulse can direct it to either side, either to good or to evil. And because of this situation facing so many of our young people today, we are having a great increase in school dropouts. J. Edgar Hoover reports that there is a 98% increase in crime from 1950 to 1960. Juvenile arrests have been increased 116% in the last 10 years. Over 1 million young people under 19 years of age were jailed last year. The rate of unemployment for the 16 to 19-year-olds who make up about 60% or 6% of the labor force was above 15% last year. An alarming increasing number of early marriages are ending in divorce. In some areas, we find that the young person who's married in high school, within 2 years, 3 out of 4 marriages are ending in the divorce courts. We also are discovering that in the swift change during the past 25 years, our schools, for complicated reasons, got left behind in the advancement. One of the most important and difficult jobs we face as a nation is to adjust our schools to the 20th century needs of our young people so that they might help prepare our children to live in the century ahead. There's an old Chinese proverb which says, "Plan for a year, plant rice. Plan for a decade, plant trees. Plan for the century ahead, educate the children. Yet the gap between what we know and what we need to know keeps widening. Scientific knowledge of atomic development is a complete mystery to most of us. So is the economic machinery that affects almost every aspect of our lives. So are the languages spoken in all parts of the world. And yet, while we in our schools teach some obsolete ideas in some fields, we too often forget to teach some of the old ideas which are still very valuable. We should not educate our children just for the sake of fighting a Cold War or just to be able to get a better job. We should educate them to know what they are and what they are to become. Let us look further at some of the facts that point out the inadequacies of educational and training opportunities, especially with our rural young people. And let's look at the facts that have been discovered in the past few years about the dropouts. On the basis of the present trends and the dropouts from school, 40% of today's fifth graders will drop out of school before they graduate from high school. In the past, the student who dropped out of school could usually find an unskilled job. About 20% of all the jobs then required no special skills and no special training. But today's market is much different. Largely the result of automation, the jobs filled by yesterday's dropouts are now handled by machines. Only 5% of all available jobs are now open to unskilled labor and untrained workers. Today's dropout is not only out of school, he is often out of work, because facts show that twice as many dropouts as high school graduates are unemployed. Now, what does completion of high school mean to a young man or young woman? What does completing their education mean to them? Well, let me give it to you in dollars and cents. It means much more than this. This is not the most important thing. But it seems as if dollars and cents is what means most to so many people. So let me put it into dollars and cents. If a young person drops out before they complete the 8th grade, less than 8 years, their annual salary would be $2,551. If they complete their 8 years, they can look forward to making about $3,769 annually. If they drop out of high school before graduation, by the time they complete their 3rd year in high school, they can anticipate a job which will bring them about $4,618. If they complete high school, they can anticipate finding a job that will bring about $5,667. If they go on and complete college, they can anticipate a job which will bring them $9,206. What does this mean in their lifetime? Well, for the person who completes elementary school, it means about $154,000 in round figures. For the person who graduates from high school, it means approximately $258,000. And for the person who completes college, it means roughly $435,000. A nationwide study shows that the average income of a high school graduate is 34% higher than of a person who has only an elementary education, and they estimate that every day that a boy or girl stays in high school in dollars and cents, it is worth $105.55. Yet in the present year, 2,750,000 young people will complete their public school either through graduation from high school or by dropping out before graduation. They will then be faced with one of the great decisions of their lives. whether to continue their education beyond high school or to enter the labor market. This decision, which started probably taking shape much earlier in their life, will determine the type of career they will follow, the income throughout life, the association, their associates, their family life, where they will live, the extent to which he will be free to make future decisions, the health, their happiness, and the contribution they will make to their community and to society. Now, a decision of such great importance is not only the concern of the young person themselves, but of the society as a whole. Now, the young person should have freedom of choice, but it is our responsibility to provide the information, the opportunities, and the reward which makes it possible for an individual to make a wise choice, one which will make use of his talents and provide the personal satisfaction they so deeply need. Since next year, only 37% of our high school graduates from rural areas will enter college. We have 63% of our rural farm boys and girls who have no special occupational training, looking for employment in competition with 5.5 million other young men and women who lack the same type of training. Many will find it impossible to obtain employment without special effort to improve their vocational skills. This certainly points up the need for the expansion of vocational training in our high schools. The type of vocational training available in most rural areas in our high schools in the past has been in the field of voag and homemakers. Today, when 9 out of every 10 of our farm-reared boys are leaving the farm to find employment, a real need exists for offering training directed toward jobs which many of our rural young people will eventually seek to occupy. And sad to say, at the present time, most of them are outside of our rural communities. Shrinking job opportunities in rural areas have been the major factor in the migration of our farm youth to the urban areas. This migration of young people from our rural to urban areas has resulted in an unbalanced age structure in our farm communities. It has been so great that in many of our strictly rural communities and counties today, they are recording more deaths than births. Farm people aged 60 to 69 far outnumber those from 20 to 29. The community is largely made up of people nearing retirement age. And so as a result, we have a sleepy or declining community that makes no plans for growth and development. A community that does not attract new industry because they do not have the labor force to attract the industry. The dependent population becomes a depressant on the local economy. And the cost of services in that community must be borne by smaller and smaller number of people, and the older age group increases the cost of welfare and health programs. These rural families have borne the cost of educating our young people, and this is estimated at $20,000 if the young person has reached productive age. And then the young person leaves the community where many of them would have stayed if suitable employment were available. Now, rural America cannot grow, nor can it expect to keep more of its young people unless it creates new job opportunities, which will, in turn, will it bring the improved living conditions that the young people seek and help to build the facilities they need, such as schools, hospitals, water supply, etc. All too often, the problems of rural America have been blamed entirely on the excess farm production, and the solutions have been geared to commodities. Although slow in recognizing the real problems, perhaps, today, Much of the work of our government agencies is oriented to the people of rural America rather than to the commodities produced in rural America. These programs are aimed through locally initiated and locally determined activities at removing the cause of low income, underdevelopment, rural poverty, declining villages and towns, and providing public facilities and services in rural America. The success of these programs will depend upon the understanding of the people who are now living in the rural communities and the initiative they take in starting and sustaining these programs. One of these programs is the Rural Area Development Program started back in 1961. This is really the first major effort in the United States history to help rural people help themselves revitalize existing communities and to build new ones. This program is a systematic nationwide effort to ease the maladjustment that has arisen as a result of mechanization in agriculture. The program is carried on through the joint efforts of the United States Department of Agriculture, state government, public bodies, private organizations, and the people of the rural communities to meet the urgent needs of jobs, homes, community facilities, schools, and resource development. A dominant concern in this program is jobs for young people in rural areas. The goal is jobs that, with comparable pay and chances for advancement as found in the city. The objective is a rural economy offering a great diversion of jobs and ways of earning a living that will encourage our young people to take root, build homes, and help build vigorous rural communities across America. In the 2 years of operation of this program, many rural communities have initiated this program. Most of the projects have been to bring new industry into the area. And of course, this is a first step because it raises the income and creates new jobs in the community. But let us hope the people in these communities do not stop there, because just building a new shirt factory in the community is not the total answer. This is only the beginning. Another program, the Area Redevelopment Program, is designed to create new jobs in areas of high chronic underemployment in our smaller towns and rural areas as well, benefited from them, in any area where there is a low income. This, too, must be initiated by people in the community. One of the best features of the program is the occupational training program, which makes it possible for these young men and women who drop out of high school or who graduate without any special training and who do not go on to college. If this program is expanded, it gives our young people an opportunity for some of this occupational training, which is so badly needed. The Youth Employment Program, Employment Bill, designed to establish a Youth Conservation Corps and a Youth Corps, both of which would provide youth wonderful work experience, is still bottled up in the House Rules Committee in our Congress. President Kennedy stated about this program, it will provide jobs for thousands of young men entering the labor market. At the same time, it will provide a ready means of advancing the conservation work in our national forests. The young men joining this corps will be working for our country, getting a chance to develop some skills, leaving behind them something which will be memorable, instead of being on a street corner waiting for a job that does not come. Legislation to establish a National Service Corps was introduced last February. It is bottled up in the House Committee. This legislation, if passed, would provide for the selection of men and women of all ages, young and old, working under local direction with professional personnel and part-time local volunteers, to help provide the urgently needed services in mental health centers, hospitals, and work on Indian reservations and with families of migrant workers, and in the educational and social institutions of hard-hit slum or rural poverty areas. Now, the problems of the young people should be the concern of every one of us. If you really stop to think of it, folks, if we can solve the problems facing the young people today, most of the problems facing us as adults will be solved. So what is our responsibility as Farmers Union members and leaders? What can we do? Well, first, we can continue to work as we have in the past in the legislative field for legislation that will improve conditions for people. And I've always been proud to be a member of the organization that has worked for this type of legislation over the years. Only let's not be passive or indifferent and let George do the job. Let us accept our responsibilities as individuals in the communities and as members of our organization to promote the legislation necessary to first, as an individual, let us first say, I will inform myself about these programs, and then I will take the responsibility of informing others. And then I will help take the initiative in my community to develop these programs that can mean so much to our young people and to the future of our rural communities and the future of America. We in Farmers Union have recently made an evaluation of our youth program and are now in the process of adjusting it to more adequately meet the changing needs and circumstances of our young people. The changes thus far are mainly in the structural area in order to be more effective. And while no great drastic changes are anticipated as to subject matter and values taught in the past, new techniques, new emphasis can be introduced which we feel will be more interesting as well as more beneficial to our young people. And so we anticipate continuing to evaluate and change our program to meet the needs of the young people as we go on. So the challenge is great. The problems are many. We can no longer ignore the urgency of the situation. Each of us is a part of either the problem or the answer. Either we are unaware, unconcerned, or ineffective in meeting the needs and are therefore a part of the problem, or we are alert, informed, and aggressively providing the answers which the needs of today demand.
Testing 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4.
Of our young people who were on the platform representing the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young men and women throughout our rural areas, let us join and be in step together, helping our young people solve their problems, and in doing so, folks, we are making America really great. Thank you.
South Dakota Farmers Union President Ben Radcliffe reporting to the 48th Annual Convention of the South Dakota Farmers Union.
See the young people up here in the gallery. I'm certainly glad that they were here to hear your address, and it's something that they should really consider. All right, now, if we will clear the stage, we'll get ready for the torchbearer ceremony, which will be the real climax to the program this evening.
Greetings from South Dakota Association of Cooperatives, Lloyd A. Ernst.
Chairman Ben, members of the board, guests, and members of the South Dakota Farmers Union. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be the first on your program to have an opportunity to appear when everyone is, shall we say, fresh in the morning. And I assure you I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's entirely appropriate that an organization such as yours should hold its state convention a year in and or year after year during the month of October, which has appropriately become nicknamed as Co-op Month each year. Certainly you're closely identified with cooperatives, and you have a long history of organizing and assisting in the development of cooperatives. It occurs to me some months ago I was called upon by one of the graduate classes studying farm organizations in the field or relation to rural sociology at our college, and they asked that I appear there and review the historic development of cooperatives in this country, and tying it in with the role that the General Farm Organization has had in building cooperatives. Naturally, this required some research and checking into the annals of history. And I can say in all sincerity that among the General Farm Organizations, Farmers Union can proudly take the first, unchallenged for its role in helping to develop cooperatives from the Rocky Mountains to east of the Mississippi, from the Gulf to the Canadian border. I think this is tremendous. This has certainly been one of your great achievements. I would like to this morning, for the benefit of some of you who may not be entirely familiar with the South Dakota Association of Cooperatives, just review briefly its purpose and some of its functions. I should say first, the South Dakota Association of Cooperatives represents a coming together of all types of cooperatives. We have in the roles of our, among our members, practically every type of cooperative that is found in this state. It always occurs to me there are about 3 funeral cooperatives which we haven't succeeded in bringing into the association. And this comes as a surprise to many people that this way of working together can be extended even to an organization such as a burial association. The South Dakota Association of Cooperatives then is organized to do such things which cooperatives cannot do by themselves, and to do such things which can best be accomplished by working together. Certainly it is times when cooperatives work together that progress is made, just like times when all of agriculture works together, that real progress is made on both the economic and social fronts. This association functions in 3 primary areas. 1, education. Now, I don't believe I have to convince you folks of the fact that education is probably the first need in cooperatives today, to promote better understanding and acceptance. This is the real challenge that faces us, and a challenge in which we work closely hand in hand with you. It's a fact that cooperatives are not accepted as a significant and integral part of the curriculum, either in the elementary, secondary, or higher education levels. And this is real and unfortunate, because cooperatives today in this state provide services for some 308,000 people. Secondly, this association serves as the legislative liaison for cooperatives in this state, and I shall briefly review in a moment one of the real legislative challenges that I believe will face us this forthcoming session of the legislature. And thirdly, we serve in the area of member services, performing certain services for members, such as assisting with meetings, providing information, assistance, and management schools, etc. I think I could do no better in the time that you've been generous enough to allot me this morning than to review some of the things that have transpired this past year in their relation to cooperatives. I think all in all it has been a very significant year for cooperatives. I'm talking here about the good as well as the bad. First of all, we saw this during this past year, a coming together of all cooperatives on the national level. Under one roof, all the great cooperative organizations in this land assembled to look at to examine the very challenging theme, cooperatives in the future. And out of this came a great deal of planning. But I think right at hand, the most important thing that came out of that assembly was a new policy by the United States Department of Agriculture. And I might say it's among one of the finest policies ever written in relation to cooperatives by that agency of government. In the very general sense, this policy says that USDA fully accepts its responsibility to encourage and promote the development of cooperatives across this land. And certainly USDA, all agencies of USDA, in their close proximity to the family farm itself, have a very important responsibility in this area. And I'm sure your speakers representing USDA who will appear here throughout your convention will go into greater depth in that policy. We're tremendously pleased that such a policy was written. We're prepared here on the state level to assist and encourage the implementation in each agency found in South Dakota. Secondly, we saw in 1963 one of the biggest stock retirements in the history of cooperatives in this country. And incidentally, this is by one of the fine cooperatives affiliated with your organization. A total of $7,103,372, of which $898,825 comes back to our own state. I say this is pretty tremendous, and I want to congratulate Farmers Union and Farmers Union Central Exchange for this outstanding achievement. We can only hope that this would be true in the other industries organized in another manner. We can only hope that the processing and the manufacturing industries which serve our agriculture in this state could claim certain similar credit. Now, it's a fact that only a small or relatively small amount of the dollars expended by agriculture go to cooperatives. It's less than 25% for farm supplies. And yet, we see achievements like this, all indicating certainly that we need to, as farmers, more and more get beyond just producing the raw product. We need to get into more and more the more profitable end of agribusiness, and that is to process the raw product which we produce. And that is to produce the supply and the goods that are necessary for the production of our raw products. In other words, integration, vertical and horizontal, that is farmer-oriented and farmer-controlled. Certainly, that is the profitable area of agribusiness. It's a fact today that only a little more than 1/3 of the consumer dollar comes back to you folks, the farmer, for producing this just a raw product, and the other 2/3 goes to the guys that put it in packages and grind it and make breakfast cereal or whatever. Another thing that transpired this year of great significance to cooperatives was the passage of Chapter 362 by our state legislature. Very few people know about this, but this is no small thing. This calls for the revision and modernization of the corporation laws of this state. And most of you who are, or many of you are directors, and some of you are managers of cooperatives, and you know, of course, that in the corporation code is to be found the heart of our cooperative law, chapters 1110 and 1111. Now, when we get into the business of revising cooperative laws, there are many factors that come into play. This includes the legislative environment, includes how well cooperatives are prepared to stand behind an effort and unite behind something. And I say this is something that I know your organization will be following very closely. We have suspected this would come about and have for the past 2 years spent a great deal of time and effort in preparation. And I'm happy to say that your president, Ben Radcliffe, was among those who assisted in the development of a single cooperative law, that is, a proposed law. We knew this would ultimately come about, that such a chapter would be passed calling for revision. So we thought, well, it'd be better if farmers themselves or cooperative interests themselves took the initiative and developed a statute themselves rather than have the Bar Association or a committee in the legislature do it, which is far removed from cooperatives. And finally, this was a year in which electric cooperatives took one of the worst setbacks in the history of that program. As it now is, a commercial power company owned wherever it may be can buy out significant and important parts of rural electric cooperatives in rural areas which may be annexed to municipalities. I say this is a tremendous challenge to organizations such as yours and ours. And I'm sure you're going to hear a great deal more about this from the Rural Electric Association representative to appear here later. I say this was a significant year for cooperatives, an important one. We've got to take the good, or I should say we've got to take the bad with the good. But we can certainly do something about the bad in the years to come, and probably more certainly the legislature which comes or convenes this January. I want to say again, it's been a pleasure for me to appear here and present some of my thoughts. I would take this opportunity too to invite all of you to attend the annual meeting of the South Dakota Association of Cooperatives, this year scheduled for November 18 and 19 here in Huron. We will examine and look into USDA's new policy and its implementation here on the state level. We will have one of your past national officers and fine leaders, John Baker, who is now, as you know, Assistant Secretary of Agriculture, serve as the keynote speaker for our convention and focusing specifically on USDA's new policy. Our theme will be Cooperatives, the Core of Future Progress. I think it's a very challenging theme. And to cap it, we'll have Jerry Voorhees, who is Executive Director of the Co-op League, serve as our banquet speaker. So again, let me take this opportunity to invite you to our convention, and again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning.